All the action packed in 180 minutes. Power Breakfast with Tessa Dooms. Weekdays 6 to 9 a.m.
Shifting gears a little bit to education and our school system and the ways in which young people, children's lives are being affected, and the way in which shows up in the school systems and in the way they engage with each other. This is particularly around the question about access to pornography. And so children definitely have more access today to pornography than they've had before. And so there's a report that's come from the National Center of Child Protection and other child welfare organizations that has revealed that children as young as 6 are gaining access to explicit content, largely due to unrestricted use of cell phones and other kinds of devices. But what is this impact that it is having on the way they relate to each other, and how does it show up in the spaces like schools where children are interacting with each other? We have with us social media legal consultant for cyber safety enthusiasts and a cyber safety enthusiast, Lerato Ntwampe, just to give us their take or her take on what is happening within the space of cybersecurity, porn, and the impact on children. Lerato, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Tessa. Thank you so much for having me.
And so children as young as 6 and on average between the ages of 10 and 13 as well, exposed to explicit content. What are the implications for how children are then socialized and behaving amongst each other? And especially how does it result in the behavior we see at schools?
I think, the addiction to pornography is driven predominantly by the increasing access to smartphones and tablets, especially in schools. I think parents are very quick to get, these gadgets for their children without putting any, parental controls in place, without, managing access through screen time routines, or ensuring that the devices have passwords and protected, devices, and ensuring that, they block inappropriate content. Obviously, this has a major impact on how children behave, especially towards each other. You get kids who want to sort of emulate what they've seen, especially if they've seen pornography. They want to touch other, kids' private parts. They become curious about what they see, and most of them also, use that to actually share with other children because of what they've seen. It's just a lot of curiosity, which could lead to, addiction, and kids also, then trying to emulate by then creating, the routines that they've seen or pictures that they've seen, which leads to child exploitation, as well as, sexual aggression and grooming of other children.
So, Lerato, really going to try to be as sensitive about this as I possibly can. But it is not a new phenomenon for children to be exploring in terms of sexuality, even at school-going ages, right? So I remember being at a high school where there were certain areas where people would go in order to try and explore sexually, trying to be really sensitive here. And then, of course, children's access to, or curiosity, as you call it, when it comes to sexuality. Some might say that is also something that has long-standing roots, developmental roots in some cases. What does pornography add to that makes it particularly harmful?
Sure. I think, it's how it actually, especially for boy children, how they view women as sexual objects. It fuels attributes of supporting violence, especially against women. It shapes boys, sexual expectations of women. Some of them watch, pornography that's very, very violent, which, increases the violent and degrading nature in how they perceive sex. Also, the acceptance of sexual aggressions. There are different types of pornography and how they actually, access them. And there's different categories. And we're seeing more and more, especially the ones that people are uploading online, that are very, very aggressive in nature. Also the unrealistic expectations of, females and what their bodies need to look like. Equally so for boys, how they're expected to be ripped and have big boobs and and things like that. It can shape their sort of perception and how they're supposed to look and their body image. Also, the perpetration of sexual aggression. As I've mentioned, there are different categories, but, the more you get addicted to porn, the more you get, sort of, you want to be interested in more hardcore, sort of like bondage type of content, which could really, really affect how you view sexual relations, especially with the opposite sex.
And this is also in a context where, again, historically, children have reported that their first engagement with sexual conversations and understanding sex has come through peer-to-peer learning. And so this kind of amplifies that peer-to-peer, because now you're not just talking about it. You can show each other explicit videos, show each other explicit content to amplify those conversations. But Lerato, maybe just to also link this to a conversation that was had maybe in the main about 5 years ago around the Sexual Offences Bill and the criminalization of children's sexuality. Because I remember there was a court case there around not criminalizing sexual exploration, especially around preteens and teens. But that needs to be then supplemented with socialization. It needs to be supplemented with some parenting and social engagement with children about what they should be able to talk about in terms of building a healthy sexuality. Is there a societal path and commitment towards guiding children towards healthy sexualities, particularly that age of 10 to 13 where puberty strikes and all of that? We've had a culture of avoiding those conversations and avoiding engaging with children at those periods, and therefore leaving them in their own hands to their own devices, and now with other devices involved. Should we be paying more attention to that?
Sure. I think, you've actually made the point. I think we do shy away from having these conversations with our children, yet we give them these smartphones and they can, easily have access to these things. Kids are allowed to have, phones in their bedrooms, and a lot can go wrong because, it's very easy to access pornography in these days and age. So I think it is important, that we talk to our children about sex. We talk to them about consent, obviously, appropriate as they develop. I think starting with body parts, naming body parts for what they are is an important part of having the conversation. Yeah. Then having a conversation about, a good touch and a bad touch. Who's allowed to touch you? Who's not allowed to touch you? Who you're not allowed to touch? Because sometimes I think parents spend so much time teaching their children about who's not allowed to touch them, but they don't have the conversation about that they can't also touch other people in certain areas. Yeah. So I think building, as the child develops, start with body parts, then you speak about consent, then you speak about, the right touch, the wrong touch, then you speak about, whatever they see online that makes them uncomfortable. They need to be able to speak to their parents about it. Yeah. It's also important to have boundaries, especially if you are going to give your child a smartphone, or they have access to the internet, whether it's a computer or a tablet at home. You have to manage, their screen time. You have to have parental controls. You have to check age ratings and consumer advisory. I think we live in an age now where a child is watching TV or a tablet in their own room, that the conversations around sex where, when we were growing up, when the sex scene came on TV, it would be awkward, but it would open the dialogue. Whether the parent would be avoidant and try to switch it off, or another parent would encourage the conversation. Yeah. I think we've moved a lot away from that, because now people are watching TV either on their phones, in their bedrooms, and the sort of conversation around sex and sex scenes and consent, are not being had. I think more conversation needs to be had, and that parents need to stop shying away, from having these type of conversations, because if we don't have these conversations, kids become addicted to pornography, and we're seeing that quite often in schools, even in the rural areas. Sometimes it's not pornography, but the living arrangement where they're living in a one bedroom, close quarters, and the parents are having sexual relations, and kids emulate that when they get to school in creche. because they've seen their parents sort of do it. So I think we need to just be more mindful and have more conversations and not shy away from what's happening, in our society, particularly when it comes to children and pornography.
And Lerato, what you just raised about low resource environments leading to children to have much closer proximity than what we would probably deem proper to sexual relations in their homes. That is complicated by many factors. One is the number of children who are sexually exploited by family members, so their homes are not safe even for their own protection from sexual exploitation. So that's another layer to it. But when we're talking about parents intervening and this active parenting that you're describing, another thing that poverty does is it means that people are not able to have the time to be in their homes with their children so that they can check the phones. That seems like a very big luxury of time to be able to do that. In that case, again, the de facto becomes the schooling system, and it becomes the societal structures that we set up for recreation and childcare after school. Are any of those systems ready to be those kind of de facto parental figures when the parents are not able to, because of poverty or other things, to intervene?
Sure. I think, I've seen it, especially in the schools that I work with. Schools that are more predominant, are able to have, the funds to have the filtering systems and ensure that they have, DNS filters that protect Wi-Fi, or, are able to block, filtering systems put in place to ensure that kids are not exposed to explicit content or content, that might be a bit problematic. And we're seeing that, schools predominantly in the rural areas and in the townships don't necessarily have the same. They're given these tablets by the schools, but then there are no, measures put into place. They can't call a Lerato to have a social media talk or cybersecurity talk, to explain some of the dangers of using these devices and how to actually protect themselves. So we're seeing that, there are a lot of civil organizations that are trying to work and empower and kids and digital education. But what I've seen is that some of the content doesn't really necessarily relate to, sexual abuse material, online sexual exploitation. Some of those, necessary topics are not really speaking to it. We're trying to sell this digital skills, which is, it is important. But I think also, we need a societal structure that helps. 100% that also helps them to be able to deal with this
and navigate it.
And navigate it, because kids are being exploited, especially using phones where, you've mentioned cousins, but also there are people in the community who exploit kids. They buy the kids the smartphone, they send the kids the e-wallet, and they're able to basically groom these children to become what they are. And that's why we have so many issues when it comes to sexual trafficking. Because kids are so, involved. And also there's a lot of factors when you speak, speak about how, influencing as well.
Absolutely.
That app that you're able to make money when you post certain things. Culture of posting and, because you're making so much money.
So we are socializing children, but just in all the wrong ways at this point.
100%.
But thank you so much for laying this out for us, Lerato Ntwampe, who is a legal analyst around the issue around children's exploitation and particularly cybersecurity. We actually have a serious problem on our hands, and we have to address it as a collective.